Well, looks like the worm finally turned. Okay, worm, I have been waiting for this. Hello. This is me and my friend Pete, the podcast that explores all things The Amazing Spider-Man. I'm your host, Gerald. If this is your first time with us, welcome. If it isn't, welcome back. This week, we're diving into The Amazing Spider-Man number 8, Spider-Man, the Terrible Threat of the Living Brain. If you haven't already, please like, comment, subscribe, and review, as your opinion, both good and bad, matter not only to me, but the curious folks outside of our listening community who may be swayed by your opinions to join in. Shout out to the right minders, the big three, the key keepers, and the high council. To you I say I see you and I thank you for your support. And to you all I say, we're going to need some oil, a jar of vaseline, a couple of beach towels, and whatever else you got stashed away in your junk drawers, because Spidey is all over the place in this one. We've got Pete pushed to the limit, putting paws on Flash Thompson. We've got a bromance burnt to bits by bravado and blunder that boils over into a bash at the beach, better than Flair versus Macho in 9-5. And we've got another Midtown High showdown, as Spidey goes one-on-one with the world's smartest supercomputer, the emerald engine of Enumeration, Emself. The living brain. That's stories on stories on stories. We've got me, we've got you, we've got no further ado. We've got The Amazing Spider-Man number
Infinity.
Spider-Man, the terrible threat of the living brain. And Spider-Man tackles the torch. My God, it's like Christmas morning. Me and my best friend Pete. Old adventures, new critiques. He spins webs, I spin yarns. Kinda kooky, be forewarned. Look out, it's me and my friend Pete. Jumping into the credits on this one, we have writing, Smiling Stan Lee. This was illustrated by Swingin' Steve Ditko and lettering by Art. It's in the name, Simic. Reading these classics, I found that these were the first listed nicknames for Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, and you call a person what they say their names are. So Stan's smiling and Steve's living his life like it's golden. He's swinging. Back two. So we're moving on to the cover. I'm going to tell you the negative space color on this comic, and you tell me how I feel about it. Negative space color, goldenrod. Instant classic. I knew you understood me. The title, The Amazing Spider-Man, is in Spidey costume red with Spidey costume blue shadowing beneath it. Looks great on the goldenrod. Beneath that, on a green banner, we see this is the special tribute to teenagers issue, so Marvel's showing its fans some love, chalking this one full of story. In a circle beneath the banner to the right, we see Spidey on a sheer wall, a gray robot with three-pronged fingers moving towards him. The caption in this circle says, C, Spider-Man versus the living brain. Beneath this, we see a topless Pete Rock, his Spidey sense tingling, brown boxing mitts and purple trunks. His arms are raised as we see a topless, blue trunk, strawberry-haired dude taking a swing at him. This dude, none other than Asbestos Man's number one rival, the Brand X Kid himself, the cock of the walk, Flash Fist on Flight Thompson. And the caption reads, C, Peter Parker's fight with Flash Thompson. And to the left of this, his right hand raised, his left hand lowered, both feet moving, he's booking it, The Amazing Spider-Man. I don't know what he did, but he's got Sifu Hot Rod himself on his tail. Johnny the Human Torch has flown in from the right of the page, and in his flame trail it says, don't miss our extra added attraction. Spider-Man tackles the Human Torch. No time to say hello, goodbye, am I right? Let's get into it. Page 1, we get a splash page in high action. We see the Spider-Man head logo next to the title of this issue, The Terrible Threat of the Living Brain. I like the way it's written. Living is written in red with action lines around it, and brain is written in blue. But the blue is covered by black squiggly lines. Makes me think brain, why not? Beneath brain, we got action. As we see Spidey in air, his arms outstretched, he's diving towards the living brain. The living brain's mechanical arms are whirling at super speed, and it's barreling towards a group of afraid but stylish kids. The kids at Midtown High take no days off on style. We've got sky blue and purple working, royal blue and green, fiery red blouses, fear and raised hands to go along with them. Describing the living brain is much less colorful. Imagine a frozen dinner tray. Any brand from Lunchables to the stuff they store in freezers. That's the living brain's body. It's emerald green and boxed. You know all those different dividers for the food trays on that Lunchables box? Imagine those parts. Gold. The living brain's head is shaped like the glass case Beast keeps his enchanted rose in Beauty and the Beast. But it's all black, but it reflects gold. This machine has gotta cost a pretty penny. And it has to have a hell of a gyroscopic system on board too, because it is top heavy. Those whirling arms, they're twice as big as the legs it's rolled in on, and these legs are supporting it no problem. I need to know more about this machine. But first, Marvel's got questions. How would you like to see Pete Parker fight Flash Thompson? See Spider-Man fight a non-human menace? See a tale of sheer fantasy so real you'll feel it's happening to you? You'd like it? Okay, you've got it. Start reading. Gotta give the people what they want. The story opens on page 2 as we see two men, one brown flat cap, brown shirt, the other SJB jumpsuit and hat, pushing the living brain into the senior science classroom of Midtown High School. So we know Pete and the gang are seniors. We see Pete's teacher on stage right of the room. He's wearing a lab coat because he's always wearing a lab coat. He's got a brown vest, red tie, brown pants, his brown Carl Winslow hair working, and he's telling the two gentlemen to put the living brain in the center of the room. On stage left, we see the senior students. We've got Flash in a green turtleneck, Adidas stripes running horizontally across his chest, and the hems of his shirt, the cuffs, the opening, and on the turtleneck. Where does this kid get these sweaters? We see Liz Allen. She's in monochrome red and a blouse with a large red bow on his collar. Very stylish. And we see the goldenrod kid himself. His hair perfectly combed. His horn-rimmed glasses, as always, sitting on his face. He's wearing a pinstripe shirt, a goldenrod-colored vest over it, a red tie and SJBs. He has his back to the door and is looking down at a gray book in his hands. Flash says that the living brain is a creepy-looking gizmo, and Pete, not bothering to look at the machine at all, insults Flash, saying, "That gizmo happens to be one of the scientific marvels of the age, loudmouth." Just straight took a shot. We can say this is unprovoked, but we've all been watching. We've all seen the slow burn. Whether we've seen it or not, Flash ain't having it. Half turning, he tells Pete he only talks smack when teachers are around and mushes him on the side of the head. Like, I don't care who's around, I'm the Brand X kid. Pete screams, "Look out, you dumb clown, my glasses!" As his glasses fall to the floor and shatter, and things escalate quickly. Flash says, "Don't make a thing of it, it was an accident." Pete says, "The only accident here is you. Like, you're proof that condoms aren't 100% effective." The next panel, we see Liz between the two of them, being the voice of reason. You know Liz has got an old soul. She says, "Boys, boys, boys, keep your voice down, we're still in class." And all their words and the dialogue balloons here are light blue, so I assume they're scream whispering because everything is in exclamations. And Pete says, "Okay, Liz, but Flash has gone too far this time." Flash says, "Stick around after class so I can show you how far I'll go." They are heated. We get a panel of Pete Rock, his spider sense ablaze as he thinks, "I've had it. I'm through. Pretending to be a pennyweight to conceal my real identity? I don't need those specs anyway." Uh-oh, Mr. Warren's calling class to order. So we know two things now. Pete's ditching the glasses. I think this was a great and organic way to get rid of them so the similarities between him and the guy over at the Daily Planet weren't so glaring. And that Pete's teacher's name is Mr. Warren. That name is going to become very important to the Spider-Man mythos way down the line, so bank it. And in the final panel, Mr. Warren calls for attention from the class as we see an older man with wispy white hair, glasses, a purple suit, nice suit, and blue tie enter the room. Warren says this is Mr. Petty from the ICM Corporation and that he's been going around the country demonstrating how well the living brain can compute. And today, it's Midtown High's turn to see what the living brain can do. He introduces Mr. Petty while Flash and Pete continue to threaten each other, all the while getting louder and louder. Flash says Pete will be better off if they introduce a doctor because he's going to need it. Pete says, "Give your jaw a rest before I fracture it." They are there. They've had enough of each other. Page 3 opens to Mr. Petty thanking Warren for the introduction and taking the floor. He gives an explanation of the living brain's abilities, saying, "We built our computer in the form of a human body in order to dramatize its powers. It is the greatest mechanical brain ever built. In fact, we call it the living brain. Notice how its legs have ball-bearing rollers on them, enabling the brain to move upon command. And its arms are so constructed that they too can perform simple motions. But the most important thing about the brain, of course, is its ability to think. It contains more knowledge than any other brain on Earth, human or mechanical. It will answer any question which is fed to it, basing its answer on the vast storehouse of information which it possesses. And unlike the human brain, it never forgets a thing. Now, Mr. Warren, would you select a student to assist me, please?" Of course, Warren chooses Pete, and Pete says he'd be happy to do it, and Flash yells him again, calling him a professional teacher's pet. Before Pete can respond, Liz tells Flash to be quiet and says, "Let's see what Pete can do." Pete goes up to the front of the class and impresses Mr. Petty right away with his ability to program the living brain. And Pete says, "Thanks, I've actually studied about this thing a lot and have always been interested in robotic brains. Young savant, always be learning." Warren tells the class to think of a question to ask the living brain and they'll see if the machine can answer it. In the final panel, we get a close-up of the two guys who helped bring the living brain into the room. Brown Flat Cap says, "Did you hear him call the brain he? Like it was a real person?" And SJB Cap replies, "It's smarter than any real person. It can figure out horse race winners, elections, anything. We could get rich if we owned it." I'm starting to think these two may be members of the illustrious Burger Gang. They have no idea how to operate this machine and are already planning on using it. I imagine Oswald King, janitor, called out, and these are a couple of stand-ins for the day, and they're immediately giving blue-collar workers a bad name. Page 4 opens to the gang excitedly deciding what questions to ask the living brain in a beautiful crowd in action shot. Bruni doesn't know what to ask. We've got a dark brown-haired boy, blue shirt. He's clueless too. We go to Flash Thompson. You already know he's clueless, so the decision falls to Liz. Liz, always ready for her moment, holds up a copy of Now magazine and she says, "Yes, I thought of something everybody would like to know. Let's see how smart the brain really is. What is Spider-Man's real identity?" The next panel, we see the class saying that's a great idea. That's a great thing to ask the living brain. As Pete, standing in front of the living brain, goes neuroses, right away, he thinks, "This is terrible. What if the brain is smart enough to answer that? What'll I do?" Behind him, Mr. Petty says that's a difficult question, but if we put in all the facts we know about Spidey, the living brain may be able to figure out the answer. We get a great panel of the gang shouting out suggestions to put into the living brain. A sandy blonde-haired girl says Spidey's 5'10". A boy with matching colored hair says he's about 160 pounds. Flash says he's been sighted in Forest Hills a lot. And Liz gives no information at all, saying he's the most wonderful, heroic, glamorous man in the whole world. Liz, we're asking for facts and you're giving opinions. I agree with these opinions, absolutely. That's my man Pete. But that ain't no fact. There are people that don't agree. See, J. Jonah Jameson. Back 2. And finally, we get a big-jawed, brown-haired kid who holds up a hand at all this nonsense, waving it around the room. And he says, "If you ask me, he's a neurotic nut." We move on to the next panel and see Pete inputting the data into the machine, and he has a pitiful expression of sadness on his face. Petty tells him not to be nervous, that with all these facts, the brain has a good chance of solving Spider-Man's real identity. We get a great panel of Pete flop sweating as he imagines himself holding a slip of paper that reads Parker is Spider-Man. While the brain calculates its answer, we see Pete casting a red glow in his thoughts, and he's thinking about JJ the Tyrader, he's thinking about Lincoln Vulture, he's thinking about Queen May, Aunt May herself. So Pete's standing here thinking about all these different people. He's probably thinking about JJ and how JJ's probably going to sue the pants off him when he finds out that he's essentially been taking selfies and selling them to him. He's thinking about Lincoln Vulture because the Vulture's come at him twice now, and you can say at this point in Spidey's history, the Vulture is Spidey's archenemy, and Lincoln Vulture twice already has sucker punched Spidey and knocked him unconscious. He's probably a little bit over that. And then of course, he's probably imagining Aunt May holding a box selling shoelaces for a dime. These are the things that are going through my man Pete's head right now. And in the final panel, Petty tells Pete the answer is ready, and Pete grabs a slip of paper the machine spits out. But page 5 opens to Pete catching a break. Warren tells him that the answer is given in the form of mathematical code symbols, and that it's up to Pete to decipher them. Pete thinks this is awesome. Now I have time to think up something to get rid of this paper. We zoom back to the Burger Gang members, and Brown is telling SJB it's a deal. That the first chance they get, they're stealing the living brain, and Blue Cap says, yeah, we'll make a ton of money and skip to some other country. It has to be said that this bad plan that it is a much better plan than that slap hazard mess the Lizard threw together last episode. So Lizard, if you're listening, take at least 30 minutes to plan. Monologuing with no serum. Outlandish. Back 2. The focus shifts back to the classroom, and Flash puts his hands on Pete a third time today. Grabbing Pete by the shoulder, he tells Pete to let him have the paper because Pete's too weak to take care of something so valuable. Flash, self-professed dumbhead that he is, says that he'll decode it. But the Goldenrod kid has had enough. He grabs Flash's hand, telling him to get away because Flash wouldn't be able to decode his own name unless someone spelled it out for him. Flash keeps coming at Pete, who holds him off easily with his left hand. And of course, Flash goes to a tried and true insult, saying, well, so the worm turns, eh? And in your case, I do mean worm. But Warren's seen enough. He says, break it up, and I mean right now. And the boys let go of each other right away. Warren says he's been watching Flash and Pete now and says if they really are enemies, they need to settle their feud in the gym with the gloves. Man, to be a kid with a beef in 1964. The teacher's letting us get our rocks off. It's almost worth a visit until you remember all the segregation and hatred and sexism. I guess it's not very much different than today. You know what? I'm getting sidetracked. Back 2. Both boys agree to box it out, staring daggers at each other. And we see in the next panel, Warren wasn't wasting any time. Immediately after class, we find Pete Rock topless with boxer gloves on, a kid with sandy blonde hair and a purple sweater and yellow bow tie, tying up the laces of his gloves. Behind him, we have a Sandy and an SJB colored blouse dress combo. She's saying, poor Parker, this is one time you couldn't get out of a fight, huh? A stylish kid with a buzz cut wearing a snazzy yellow dress shirt and lavender pants says, "Don't worry, String Bean, this will be over before you know what hit you." Bruni's here, she's in a green blouse and SJB skirt, but she isn't heckling Pete, so that's a small win. All this is happening and all Pete Rock's thinking is, the only thing I'm worried about is being able to pull my punches enough so I don't really clobber that bag of wind. Anyway, everyone forgot about the paper with Spider-Man's identity on it. Meanwhile, final panel, we see the cock of the walk himself, Flash Thompson in emerald green trunks. He's getting his gloves laced up by a dapper brown-haired kid in all SJB, except for a purple bow tie. This is a snazzily dressed kid. A sandy-haired boy tells Flash not to end it too quick, that they want to see a show. And when Flash said he was waiting for this, he meant it. He says, "Don't worry, it's taken months to get Parker to agree to fight. After waiting so long, I want to really enjoy this." Liz, a worried expression on her face, tells Flash to go easy because Pete can't help it if he's not the He-Man Flash is. And she's right. Pete ain't a redundancy. He's one of a kind. We turn to page 6 and we see Flash is talking his smack. A kid asks what round Flash is going to finish Pete off in, and Flash says, "Come on, you mean what minute of the first round? I'm going to maul this kid." Another kid asks if Flash is going to tie one hand behind his back. We have the gym teacher standing in the middle of the gym, gray shirt, SJB's on, his hands on his hip, and he says he's going to call the fight. And he thinks, poor Parker. Now one student is rooting for him. I wish by some miracle that he could, but no, he hasn't a chance. Nobody expects Pete to have any chance of winning this thing. I remember reading this as a kid, and I remember, at least for me, there was no doubt that Pete was going to beat the crap out of Flash. It was just, how badly would he do it? But I love how he's viewed by these people. Even if he decodes the slip of paper and it says he's Spider-Man, nobody here would believe him. Nobody thinks he can win this fight. Now, if the Living Brain was at the Bugle, I think Betty would believe the slip of paper. I think Jameson would. But not these people. None of these people believe in him. Back 2. They hop in the ring, we get a bell, and Flash Thompson comes out swinging with a left hook. Pete's dodging every blow Flash throws from jab to haymaker, and a kid in the audience who has no knowledge of defensive boxing at all calls Pete a coward, while Pete thinks, "Wow, I'm so fast they think I'm soft. My reflexes are too good." Flash, frustrated and throwing a straight right, screams, "Come on and fight, Chicken Parker!" And Pete dodges, and he's thinking, "I'll pull my punch as much as I can." He lets loose a swing thinking, "There, I put only the smallest fraction of my power into that blow." And connects with Flash's jaw, sending the cock of the walk, the Brand X kid himself, flying through the ropes in a Superman pose and into the crowd as students scatter out of the way. Someone screams, "Holy cow, did you see that?" And Liz says, "I'm not sure, that it was a blur." Pete phantom punched Flash through the ropes. We get a great panel of Pete, a gloved hand to his head, his hair tousled, as he thinks this is why he didn't want to fight this kid. He took all of his strength out of the punch, but it was still too hard. We gotta remember, Pete's been out here fighting super villains. He's had to punch dudes in the face for real. He knocked out Dr. Octopus. He's punched the Vulture in the face. He's fought Doom, a man clad in iron and titanium. Pete has had to really throw punches. He tapped this guy on the chin, and this guy's in the bleachers. I'm telling you, I was having the time of my life reading this story. I'm having the time of my life reading it right now. We cut to Flash, who is sitting on top of a boy in a red shirt and maroon pants. The boy's looking at Flash like, "Could you please get off?" And Flash, cock of the walk, he is stunned. How stunned? Ditko gave him question marks floating above his head like a soldier in Metal Gear when you knock on a wall. Huh? What was that noise? A kid kneels down beside Flash and says, "Pretty clever, boyo. You're just toying with Parker, aren't you? Clowning, right? Making him think he's a powerhouse before you finish him off." And Flash, still stunned, starts lying like a crocodile, as Flash is known to do. He says, "Huh? Oh yeah, sure. That's what I'm doing. Just trying to have a few laughs before I clobber him." But we get the truth in the final panel. Flash, back in the ring with Pete, has a determined look on his face, but what's he thinking? Scared, witless. "It must have just been a lucky punch. But how did he knock me clean through the ropes? It all happened so fast, I probably tripped. Sure, that must be it. I just tripped over the ropes." In denial. It's more than a river in Egypt. It's in Flash's head right now. While Flash is trying to figure out how to survive the Goldenrod onslaught, the Berber gang are one floor above them trying to snatch and run off with the Living Brain while everyone's watching the fight. But it's not everyone, as we see Petty rush into the room asking where they're going with the Brain. SJB, looking over his shoulder, says they need to shut Petty up fast. And wasting no time, he makes his move. Spinning around, he clocks this old man with a right cross, knocking him out, but also knocking Brown Cap into the control panel of the Living Brain. Murphy's Law fills this room as so many things go wrong in in a few short seconds. Brown says he must have short-circuited the living brain because it's moving by itself as the arms of the living brain begin spinning rapidly. SJB says it's coming at us like it wants to hurt us. How do we stop it? They think about it for a second. Both men decide they can't. They break into a full sprint away from the living brain. But the Emerald Enumerator has already calculated the distance to the doors and is blocking all their exits. Bored, the living brain turns into a classroom. We see a sandy-haired boy, purple shirt, leap up screaming, "Look, it's the giant computer machine!" We see Big Brass Davis, the principal, SJB suit, papers in hand. You know he's always ready for action. He yells at the children to stay out of the way before diving at the living brain, punching it across his domed face. At least, I like to imagine that happening. We don't get to see. What we do see, final panel, Sandy screaming, "Come on, Flash boy, you've carried him long enough. Give him the old 1-2 now." Flash, paying more attention to the crowd than the kid who just sent him flying through the ropes, responds to Sandy in the crowd, saying he wants to prolong the agony. But he thinks,
"I'm trying to finish him off, but I can't. I don't get it. He dodges every punch without even trying."
And Pete, bored with this moment he's been yearning for years, is much like most of us are when we get our wish granted. He's over it and thinking about the next wish. He says, "Okay, loudmouth, the fun's over. Now you're gonna learn a lesson you'll never forget." While dodging another Flash haymaker, we turn the page and we're on
The Infinity page.
Page 8, just in time to see Pete dodge a right cross from Flash, his Spidey sense ablaze as he thinks, "I finally figured out how to hit him without splattering him all over the gym. I'll just swat him by flipping my wrist instead of my whole arm." The next panel, we see Pete cock his right hand back as he tells Flash to smile because he wants to remember him just as he is. Pete is grinning as he swings. The next panel begins.
But just then, a frantic cry rings out, and Flash automatically turns his head in the direction of the sound.
I'm sure Big Brass Davis is giving it his best, but the living brain just backhanded him through a classroom door, so Big Brass needs some assistance. His scream catches Flash's attention. Pete thinks it's too late for him to stop the swing. Liz's eyes widen in horror, and Pete knocks the Brand X kid, cock of the walk, Flash Thompson, out cold. Flash has the UFC KO arms, they're locked in front of him, and a smile on his face. This kid is sleep. Pete said he pulled his punches, but I'm not sure I believe him by the way we get a boom sound effect next to his right cross. He hit this kid like he was hitting Dr. Doom. The crowd is shocked. Liz has both hands up to her face. She's baffled. And while Flash lays at the edge of the mat in blissful sleep, a smile on his lips, a green shirt, red tie wearing kid boos Pete and says he hit Flash while his head was turned and calls foul. A kid in a maroon shirt says that was a crummy thing to do. But at least we know Liz saw Pete throwing that punch before Flash's head turned. So somebody knows Flash was legit knocked out. And it's not Pete's fault. The $1 million baby rule isn't new. You in that ring, you better be in that ring or you'll find yourself in it, out of it. Get it? I hope Flash learned a lesson. Sandy girl in a purple dress bursts into the gym. She's screaming, "Mr. Petty! Where's Mr. Petty? He's the only one who can do anything. The living brain is running amok and no one knows how to stop it." While everyone's panicked, Pete picks up Flash. Flash is still smiling in blissful sleep. And Pete carries the kid to the locker room, thinking it'll be the perfect excuse for him to change to Spider-Man. Next panel, we see the Golden Liability, suited and booted as he races up the banister of the staircase. I love that Spidey never uses stairs anymore. Any chance he gets, he's on banisters, he's on sheer walls, he's on ceilings. Stairs are for people who can't does whatever a spider can. I get it. I like it. As Spidey's racing towards the danger, he thinks that he doesn't understand how the brain could go out of control unless it was tampered with. In the final panel, we see Spidey has leapt from the stairs and landed onto the edge of the page. His Spidey sense giving him a small buzz as he screams, "Sizzling spider webs! Look at that! No wonder they're scared." My man said sizzling spider webs out loud. I feel like we got action. We turn the page and I love it when I'm right as we see a horde of children racing away from the rampaging living brain. Its arms are still whirling uncontrollably. Those are heavy metal arms. If a kid is even sideswiped by them, they'll crush whatever they hit. We know that, Spidey does too, so in no time at all, our fearless hero leaps the children, sticking his hands to the ceiling and puts himself in between the people and the danger, screaming, "Keep running, all of you! I'll take over now!" He thinks that maybe he can land on the living brain from the roof and drops onto it from above. No problem. But the living brain is a quick learner and smacks Spidey off his head, prompting Spidey to become the king of redundancies in this issue. I spent all that time vouching for how my man was not a redundancy, and Spidey goes redundancy crazy from this point on out. Let's play a game. You get some alcohol and you take a shot every time Spidey says the living brain thinks. in some way, shape, or form. You don't even have to take a shot for this first one. Spidey says he forgot the living brain thinks and says it swallowed him away easy as pie as he goes flipping head over feet. But we get a beautiful panel. If you can, check out this issue. This is page 9. This is the 5th panel. It is a beautifully drawn panel showing off Spider-Man's agility. We see Spidey landing on one foot, his other leg and arms wide. He says he's got to get in front of the living brain and warns the kids to run. So he takes to the sheer wall and races in front of the living brain, gesturing with his hands for the people to head towards the exit. With everyone out of danger, Spidey spins a large web along the corridor the living brain is racing towards, hoping to slow it down. And in the final panel, we see the living brain roll right into the webbing and get stopped in its tracks. Spider-Man's webbing is the real deal, fella. Spidey thinks, it worked! I stopped them! But page 10 opens to the living brain reaching up its right hand to test the strength of the webbing. The living brain has 3-pronged hands, so this panel just makes me laugh, imagining a robot that knows everything and nothing. Test the strength of Spidey's webbing with spindly little fingers. Spidey lands on a sheer wall nearby and hears the gears in the robot's head spinning like the living brain is trying to decide how much pressure to apply. And Spidey thinks it's impossible for the living brain to break his web. But in the next panel, the living brain bursts through the web barrier, no problem, with its arms raised. And Spidey screams the living brain's stronger than he thought, following the machine on foot. Spidey tries a new plan. He's going to test the living brain's thinking ability and runs behind the machine to see what it does. The living brain stops in its tracks and spins around, speeding towards Spidey, who, stunned for a moment, thinks, he does think, like a human. At the sound of my footsteps, he turned. The living brain extends its arms out towards Spidey, who barely dodges out of the way. Spidey races down the hallway thinking he's got to stay out of the reach of the machine's powerful arms as the living brain gives pursuit, tearing up the linoleum of the floor behind him. And in the final panel, we see the golden liability back against the wall, the living brain closing in on him, its arms spinning menacingly. We're back against the wall, we've seen it before. No problem for the webhead, who leaps over the living brain just as the machine reaches out to grab Spidey up. Spidey bounces from the floor and onto a sheer wall and sprints along it thinking the living brain won't be fooled by that maneuver again. And I gotta say, Spidey, the corner leapfrog is like your go-to move. If the living brain is immune to that, I think you're in real danger. Spidey tries a new tactic of using his agility to leap from wall to wall, but is shocked to find a group of students still stuck in the school as he turns a corner. He screams for them to run, but they tell him the door is jammed, and Spidey's like, ugh, always something in Midtown High, come on. They get to the exit and Spidey smashes through the door for the kids, no problem, and they are thunderstruck. A brown-haired boy says he pulled that lock apart like paper. With the kids all safe, Spidey turns his attention back to the living brain, but the machine is nowhere to be seen. Spidey makes his way down the hall, checking his corners, his thoughts on the living brain. I mustn't forget that even though it's only a machine, it thinks like a man. It's planning a trap for me. And of course, cosmic and comedic timing prove him right as a few seconds later, a door bursts open behind him, ripped from its hinges by the living brain. In the final panel, we get a great chunk of art as we see Spidey beneath the door and the living brain's wheels rolling across it. And Spidey's playing possum. The living brain doesn't know about his durability yet, so he's going to lay here and let the machine think he's done for. Spidey pushes up from the floor to start page 12, thinking that this trick won't save him again from the living brain. But before he can stand, Brown and SJB of the Burger Gang come tearing down the corridor, stepping onto the door without even noticing Spidey. Brown says, now's our chance to get out of here while the brain is gone. SJB agrees, saying they have to be quick before someone realizes that they messed up the controls. And Spidey, getting no respect beneath the door, is like, aha, that's it. He springs up from beneath the door, screaming, I knew the brain couldn't have become a menace by itself, but my first job is still to find it and render it harmless. And Spidey goes back on the hunt for the living brain with renewed vigor. Next, we get a great panel of Spidey's shadow, its fist raised, creeping towards a corner, where we see the wheel-bottom legs of the living brain. Spidey says if he could only reach the controls of the living brain, maybe he could figure out how to shut it down. He hears a noise around the corner and still gets caught by the living brain. The machine grabs Spidey by the wrist as Spidey thinks the machine is faster than he expected. Spidey's having deja vu thoughts because he thought this before already. The next panel, the living brain lifts Spidey off the floor and grabs his other wrist as Spidey thinks the living brain thinks so fast it's able to second guess his actions. And in the final panel, we see Spidey struggling to break his wrist free, but he notices the more pressure he exerts, the more the machine applies, and he can't get free of its grip. He can't gain any momentum or any leverage. This machine has his wrist in a vice grip. And page 13 opens to a murder attempt as the living brain hurls Spidey towards the wall, trying to splatter our favorite bug-adjacent hero. But Spidey is ready for his moment, and so are his shooters. Speeding towards the wall, he webs the sheer wall behind him at the last moment. And ladies and gentlemen, comic book history right here in the 8th issue of Amazing Spider-Man, as the webbing that shoots from Spidey's wrist makes a distinct and universally recognizable sound for the first time. Swoosh! up! The Marvel Age of Comics is here indeed! But Spidey's still in action. His web line slowing his speed, he pushes off of the wall he was racing towards with his feet, grabs a ceiling open palm that thinks luckily he's just out of the living brain's reach. But Spidey knows he can't stay up there forever, and the living brain isn't going to wait around. It's got a whole world to learn, and Spidey's making him waste his time in Midtown High. The living brain rips the doors of a nearby classroom from its hinges, and using it as a fly swatter, starts smashing it into the ceiling, aiming at the wall crawler. Does Spidey think the living brain can think? I'll say, he says, holy smoke, I'll say he can think. He's trying to dislodge me by hitting the walls. Spidey opens page 14, and when he's thinking in this one, he's thinking about the living brain thinking. Spidey's thinking, he can think, but has no conscience. To him, there is no right or wrong. As the robot completely destroys the door, Spidey climbs high up into a corner of the ceiling in the living brain's blind spot, giving himself a breather before diving back in. He shoots a web line, we get a swap sound effect as it adheres to the back of the living brain's head, and Spidey says if he holds on tight enough, the living brain won't be able to continue causing damage. But if there's one thing we know about the living brain from Spidey's musings, the robot is going to 2 plus 2, meaning it's going to figure it out. Unable to break free of the webbing, it begins spinning rapidly on the spot and pulls Spidey from the wall. Spidey screams, that hunker machine can actually outthink a human brain! He has no idea how to beat this thing. All Spidey knows is that the living brain thinks. He's struggling in this one, folks. He's going through it. The living brain sends him hurling towards the floor as Spidey shouts, look out below! Crashing into the linoleum. And the living brain's bored again.
Look, kid, I'm giving you the hand. I'm giving everybody who approaches me the hands. Just let me lead. I want to go learn the world. I am the living brain. Let me live.
So the living brain takes off board. It wants to learn new things. The 2 kids at the end of the hallway. The living brain goes barreling towards them, just as Spidey spots them as well. Spidey's still laying on the floor. He better get on the ball. Page 15 opens to a sandy-haired kid in a red button-up and khakis, hunched over trying to help a blonde-haired kid named Charlie in a gray shirt and purple pants to his feet. He's screaming, Charlie, get up! Hurry! It's almost on top of us! And at the end of the hall, we see the living brain, its arms in constant motion, zooming up the hall towards the children. The next panel, we get a great shot of the living brain from the perspective of the kid in the red shirt, hands outstretched, it's beautiful art, and we see Spidey behind the living brain, sprinting up the hall. Just as the living brain is about to clobber these children, Spidey leaps the length of the hallway and lands on top of the machine between its swirling arms. As the living brain swerves away from the children, Charlie screams, Spidey saved them, and Sandy screams, yeah, but now who's going to save Spidey? That's a good question, Sandy. Let's see. We cut back to Spidey, still hanging on to the living brain for dear life with his left hand, his right frantically poking at the machine's chest, but he can't reach the controls. Spidey thinks what's becoming my favorite comic book catchphrase, this is the showdown! He thinks the living brain won't rest until he's completely destroyed, and Spidey hopes he can think of a way to stop the machine before it completes its goal. We get a close-up of Spidey frantically working on the control panel of the living brain. If he falls off the living brain, it's going to steamroll him. And if he stays on, he's going to be a sitting duck. The next panel, we get a beautiful panel, a beautiful perspective shift. We're looking through the window of Midtown High at Spidey as he's carried towards the stairs by the living brain. Spidey's about to go over the edge of the stairs. The living brain has no feet. If it hits these stairs, it's going to topple and crash down these stairs. And with Spidey in its grip, I don't care how strong Spidey is, with no way to defend himself, that is going to hurt. He could be seriously injured right now. Page 16 opens to Spidey realizing he can't get free of the living brain's grip in time as they plunge over the edge of the staircase. Spidey swaps the landing above them with a strand of web and holds onto the living brain for dear life as they go crashing through the window we were just watching them through. Spidey's webbing holds and we see him in the living brain fly back through the window and up the stairs before settling at the top of the landing. Spidey frees himself from the living brain's arms, saying, it was a great ride, pal, but I'm not sorry it's over. Meanwhile, on the other end of the hall, we see Brown and SJB booking it towards the staircase as Petty points at them screaming, somebody stop those two! They're responsible for what happened! And Brown says, down the stairs, quick! We'll lose them in the locker room! But who's down the stairs? None other than Flash, cock of the walk Thompson, the Brand X kid himself. He's rubbing his head thinking Pete must have had a brick in his gloves when he hit him. But Pete didn't have a brick in his gloves. Just maybe 4 years of high school aggression. Pent up rage, little beat the bully ego complex. Maybe that's what he had. Not a brick though. Spidey doesn't have Iron Fist. That's the bonus episode guy. The next panel we see Flash, fashion on trash, as usual Thompson in his street clothes, bent over, tying his shoes as he wonders aloud about the excuse he's going to use for losing to Peter Parker, but he's having trouble with a knot in his shoelace. I'm convinced Pete knocked the memory of how to tie his shoes out from Flash's head. And in the final panel, we see Brown and SJB trip over a crouch over Flash Thompson as they run full speed to avoid Petty. Page 17 opens, and in a 1,000,001 shot, more insane than Spider-Pete's mask splitting in half in his fight with the Sandman, both Brown and SJB have knocked themselves out cold as Flash stares at them, scratching his head. A brown-haired kid with a goldenrod tie is the first to reach the locker room. He spots the unconscious Burbas and says, "Wow, Flash caught both those guys." A redhead in a blue shirt follows him into the locker room saying, "Great work, Flash. How'd you do it?" We get to the next panel where you already know what's going down. If Flash is in his green turtleneck, he's lying like a crocodile. He tells the stun teams,
"You know me, I just up and let him have it."
Pete, back in his goldenrod colored vest, hiding behind a corner eavesdropping, hears this and thinks this is too good an opportunity to pass up. The next panel, we see Pete join the crowd of boys and he says, "I just realized, Flash, you're the only one who wasn't around while Spider-Man was fighting the living brain. And you knocked these two burly guys out as easy as pie. And you're just about Spider-Man's size." We have a kid in a blue sweater vest who says, "Hey, Parker's right for once." But Peter's the top student in all of the school. He's right a lot. He knows it, so he continues. He says, "And you tried to get the brain's answer to Spider-Man's identity away from me. It all ties in, doesn't it?" And Flash gets pissed, and rightfully so. He shouts,
"Knock it off, bookworm. You're imagining things. I'm not Spider-Man."
Which could seem like an overreaction until we remember that he made a promise to himself while roaming Doom's factory that he wouldn't impersonate the Wallcrawler ever again. And it's nice to see he's true to his word. Flash, morals on Thompson. Good for you. Don't call me the Wallcrawler because when I dressed up like the guy, none of you bozos rescued me from Dr. Doom. I get it, Flash. But Pete's plan works. While Flash is going on and on about not being Spidey, the redheaded kid says, "But even if you were, you'd still deny it, wouldn't you?" And the kids start pouring it on. Redhead continues. He says, "That could be why you lost the fight to Parker, so nobody would suspect who you really are." A brown-haired kid says, "Sure, everyone knows you can beat puny Parker in your sleep." And Flash just stutters through it, unsure of what to say at all, as Pete looks on smiling, thinking to himself, if they keep this up, Flash may start believing that he's Spider-Man himself. The final panel of the story, we see a full body shot of Pete Rock, half man, half amazing Spider-Man. The Pete side has his hand in his pocket and he's whistling as he walks down a New York street. He's thinking two things. First, he's going to tell the class that he lost a sheet of paper that the living brain printed out. And second, that he managed to pound on Flash without giving himself away. He thinks about his good luck. All in all, it's been a mighty pleasant day. The caption box beneath this image reads,
"Don't go away, friends. More teenage fun follows as Spider-Man mixes it up with that other useful sensation, the Human Torch."
And we're out. I'm going to play this theme music. You're going to go stretch your legs. We'll be right back.
Me and my best friend Pete, old adventures, new critiques. He spins webs, I spin yarns. Kinda kooky, be forewarned. Look out, it's me and my friend Pete.
So before we dive into Spider-Man Tackles the Torch, know that I read this story twice, trying to figure out why Spidey acted the way he did in this issue. There was no previous context, and according to everything we've seen here on Me and My Friend Pete, there was no reason for Spidey to want drama with Sifu Hot Rod. Then I remember, it's a universe. There are things going on in the universe outside of Amazing Spider-Man, and I'm happy to report I think I know why the Torch Spidey bromance was failing at the start of 1964. It started in Strange Tales Volume 1, Annual Number 2, released in October of 1963. In this story, the Human Torch is jealous of the publicity Spidey is getting in the public eye. When a precious work of art is stolen and Spidey appears to be the only suspect, Johnny jumps at the chance to take him down. Spidey goes to the Torch for help, who attacks him before agreeing to help him prove his innocence. They track down the culprit, a criminal known as the Fox, and bring the man to justice, clearing Spidey's name. Their friendship took a hit as Spidey was hurt. Torch didn't believe he was innocent from the start, but it was still pretty solid. Some notes I wrote down from that issue, no context given.
Boy, that makes me sizzle. Spidey was framed.
Spidey lights up the Statue of Liberty's torch with his Spidey symbol in a gorgeous panel. Spider-Pete designed silicone-enhanced webbing on the Infinity page. Torch knows Spidey's got a spider sense. Torch uses his privilege to get police to call off Spidey Manhunt. Everybody gets one in reverse. The Fox calls them nuts.
He says, nuts.
And those are the notes. So the bromance didn't suffer too much, but that all changed after Strange Tales number 115, released December of 1963. What drove a wedge between the Spidey Human Torch friendship? None other than Flint Two Gun Marco, aka the Sandman himself. This time, it's Johnny who's tasked with bringing Two Gun in by Mr. Fantastic. When the Torch finds the Sandman, he's walking along the George Washington Bridge with squad cars surrounding him. Torch wants a scrap, but Two Gun refuses to fight him because Two Gun only wants to fight the guy who put him away, the one and only Amazing Spider-Man. Two Gun tells the Torch to scram because he doesn't fight kids and jumps from the bridge, disappearing over the side. The next day, we see the Amazing Spider-Man on the Empire State Building spire with a megaphone calling out above the city to the Sandman. Spider-Man is calling the Sandman out. And of course, the Sandman delivers. He sneak attacks Spidey, who turns out to be the Torch in disguise, and the two have a heated battle that ends when Johnny uses a weakness they both share. Johnny floods a room with water, making it impossible for the Sandman to shapeshift. Meanwhile, Spidey finds out about their battle and races across town to help the Torch because he doesn't believe the Hot Rod can handle Sandman by himself. A police officer says he bets the Sandman won't want to escape again, knowing the Torch will be waiting, but Spidey has the final thought, and he thinks, to say nothing of Spider-Man. I'm glad that flaming freak didn't get clobbered by Sandman, but I don't like the idea of him cutting in on my capers. Sooner or later, this town will be too small for the Torch and me. The two don't even speak during the issue. Spidey's just had enough of the kids stepping on his toes. Both of these issues were fun reads, and I recommend them as Strange Tales is filled with amazing stories of Marvel's early years. Strange Tales 115 actually has a second story, The Origin of Doctor Strange. A blast to read. And with all that said, Spidey made a statement and there's no use waiting because it won't be soon before long. We've got me, we've got you, we've got story number 2. We've got the Amazing Spider-Man in Spider-Man Tackles the Torch. So the credits on this one. The writer is Smiling Stan Lee. This was drawn by Jack the Man, the Myth, the Legend Kirby. Swinging Steve Ditko did inks. And this was lettered by Sam Goes Ham Rosen. Our story opens to us getting a shot of Spidey holding a web line on the side of a building in daylight. He's on the left of this splash page with his back to us, in front of what looks like a beige villa with gold awnings and roofing. There's a white 1964 Chevrolet Stingray parked outside of this house, and a crowd of teenage boys and girls surrounding the car. It's a beautiful car and it's beautifully drawn. Kirby came to play. There were only 22,229 copies of this model produced, and Sifu Hot Rod himself owns this one. We see Johnny with his head outside of the window talking to the crowd. A red-haired girl in an olive dress and blouse says, "Hey Johnny, we've been waiting for you." A brown-haired girl in a purple shirt stands outside of the driver's side window saying Johnny didn't tell her he had a new Stingray, and it's gorgeous. We've got a preppy kid in an SJB colored sweater leaning on the hood, and he's saying traveling in style these days, eh Torch? And Johnny knows how to handle attention. He doesn't sweat it. He says the Stingray's no fantastic car, but it gets him where he's going. A sandy-haired girl in an SJB dress is pointing at the car from the lower right of the page saying, "Last week, Johnny pulled up in an XK Jag, so Johnny always gets where he's going in style." I'm willing to bet that Johnny Storm's garage could give Jay Leno a run for his money, and it's got me wondering if Johnny Storm is a drag racer. Listeners, if you know of any comics where Johnny is drag racing, let me know. I'm curious to see my man's skills in action. So all of this is going down, and Spidey's thinking that this is Doris Evans' house, the Torch's girlfriend, and since he's in the neighborhood, he's going to drop in and show her what she's missing by not dating the Amazing Spider-Man. Torch wants to tangle with my rogues, I'll tangle with his lady, and all's fair in love and war. Page 2 opens with Spidey in creep mode. He's outside of Doris's window, while inside, Torch wearing plaid green golf pants, a white shirt, and red tie does tricks with fire inside of the room. The man is a human matchstick, and he seems to only do fire tricks indoors. Spidey thinks it didn't take the Torch long to start showing off. In the next panel, Spidey decides that he's going to weave a bat made from spider webs, and we see him get to work on it in a patch of grass outside of the house. Inside of the house, we have a sandy-haired girl named Sally in purple pants, a blue spaghetti top, and a white shirt beneath it, and she's dancing as Johnny puts an infrared spotlight on her. So Spidey's missing it. Johnny shares the spotlight, he'll even make you one. But Sally's interrupted by a giant bat that comes flying into the room. All the kids scatter except Johnny, who springs into action, putting himself between the people and the danger. He swats at the bat with a pillow and says he's tangled up in its threads. Spidey, his back against the door frame, his arms folded, relaxed, says, "Not threads, sonny boy. Webs. Genuine Spider-Man webs. The kind your friendly neighborhood grocer doesn't sell. Just standing there quipping. I love it." Johnny screams, "Spider-Man, I might have known." The final panel, we see Spidey may have fans amongst the working class folks, but this group of well-to-do kids want nothing to do with him. You know they all read the Daily Bugle and they have no love for the webhead. A sandy blonde in a black strapless dress asks how Spidey got here. A gray-haired 16-year-old in an SJB blazer, so you know he's always talking money. He says Spidey's got some nerve crashing a private party. And he's right, of course. And we have a maroon-haired girl asking Johnny if he can get rid of the webhead. And Spidey's feeling all of the love, so he opens page 3 by taking a bow. A bow in a goldenrod negative space, so it's beautifully drawn and colored. And Spidey says, "Thank you, kind friends, for your warm welcome. Being you insist, I'll be glad to join your little party." Right? You don't want me here? Of course I'll stay. So Spidey's jerk is turned up to 11 right now. And Torch, still wrapped in webbing, tells Spidey that he isn't funny and to go crawl back under his stone. Spidey catching a vibe, so he asks Torch, Say, you don't happen to be related to another Sunshine boy named J. Jonah Jameson, do you? And Torch snaps. He says, okay, Big Mouth, you had your chance. If you won't leave peacefully, I'm gonna toss you out on your pointy ear. Spidey says, who writes your dialogue? Frank Merriwell? Frank Merriwell was an all-American jock-type character that played every sport, never smoked or drank, went to Yale, and solved mysteries. He debuted in the 1890s, created by Gilbert Patton, and was pretty popular well into the 20th century, with a relaunch of his series back in 1965. So if you were a kid reading comics in the 1900s through the 60s, you were probably familiar with Frank Merriwell, corn-fed, straight-edge, Ivy League white boy with a heart of gold. I think the insult is that Johnny is such a square he talks properly even when he's insulting people. Spidey jerks his thumb towards the door, says if it's a fight the Torch wants, he can meet him outside. And Spidey ain't say nothing but a word. Shedding his clothes, Johnny shouts and chases Spidey out of the house and onto the next panel where we see the webhead web-swinging above the suburban houses, the Torch on fire behind him giving chase as Spidey screams, and away we go! But Torch is not messing around. Next panel, we see him cut through Spidey's webline with a fire arrow. It's literally fire in the shape of an arrow. Spidey tells him to watch the flame and calls him a cornball, crafting 2 small web parachutes with each hand. Spidey sings as he floats to the ground. He floats through the air with the greatest of ease. My man is the daring young man on the flying trapeze, the Amazing Spider-Man. Spidey lands on the beach as the Torch smack talks, saying that'll teach you not to mess with the Human Torch. My man threw 1 fire arrow and screaming like he did something. But Spidey isn't threatened. Using his web parachutes, he scrapes them across the beach, saying he just wanted to see what Johnny could do. And now it's his. We get a great panel of Spidey pulling the parachutes, now both filled with sand behind him as the Torch rushes him. And in the final panel, we see Spidey smash both sand parachutes into the Human Torch just as the hero flies towards him, screaming, "Come and get it, Torchy! This'll cool you off, but good!" Page 4. Hold on.
Say it, get it out of the way, get it off of your chest.
I know I went on a whole rant about Spidey being able to take all members of the Fantastic Four except Sue Storm in an earlier episode of Me and My Friend Pete.
Slow down, Hot Rod, slow down.
When I tell you me and Pete came to the same conclusion at the same time on the Human Torch, back 2. Page 4 opens to the Human Torch, knee deep in sand, his head and shoulders covered as he screams, "That was very unfriendly of you, little man. Also very unwise, because now I'm really mad." And Spidey's like, if you expect me to fall on my knees and beg for mercy, you got the wrong kid. He tells the Torch to give up, but the Torch has different ideas. Focusing his heat into the earth, he causes a massive explosion on the beast that sends Spidey running for cover, screaming, "Watch it, fella! A thing like this can give a guy a headache!" There's rocks falling, there's debris falling, there's sand up in the air. Spidey's got his hands over his head and he is booking it. But the Torch is in his bag. He says, "Very funny. Now let's see how these flaming buzzsaws amuse you. I'll make you wish you'd never heard of the Human Torch by the time I'm through with you." He hurls 10 giant fiery razor blades of death at the wall crawler, who running away thinks to himself, "Those things are coming too close for comfort." But I'm not going to tell him that. Maybe I should have just quit when I was ahead. Me and Spidey came to the same exact conclusion at the same time. Holy crap, only did we have the Torch messed up. Respect on his name in abundance now. This kid is causing eruptions on the beach. He's throwing flaming buzzsaws. I thought he was being cool with the arrow. He threw 10 flaming buzzsaws at me. I imagine that's what Spidey's thinking. I think so, Spidey. I think we got it wrong. The kid's an alpha. The kid's an omega. The kid's the truth. And Johnny knows he's going nuclear. He thinks, maybe it's not fair to use so much flame against him, but I can't help it. That guy really gets under my skin. And Johnny said that, but I don't think Johnny wants to help it. In the final panel, we see him create another fireball, and he hurls it towards Spidey. The fireball expands into a giant net to open page 5, surrounding Spidey, who barely makes it through a gap in the weave. He thinks that he better just call it a draw and get out of here. I love you, Spidey. This ain't no draw. The Torch really just showed you the works. You lost. Say best 2 out of 3 if you want. Spidey crashes to the sand and, pushing himself up from the floor, sees a blue-gloved hand extended out to him. He follows the outstretched hand and realizes being stretched from 5 feet away and belongs to none other than Snoops Richards, Mr. Fantastic himself, who's sitting on the beach in full gear with the Invisible Girl and the Thing. Mr. Fantastic asks Spidey if he needs a hand. The Thing, thoroughly entertained, says,
"Oh, Torchy ain't as easy to handle as you thought, huh?"
And Spidey snaps. Snoops asks, "What are you doing, boy?" as Spidey webs up his arms, screaming, "Think I'm gonna let you sit there and laugh at me? Well, you got another thing coming. All of you." Wrapping and webbing around a giant boulder stuck in the sand, he yanks Mr. Fantastic off his feet, who says, "Nobody's laughing at you, fool. Don't make us get rough." Benji's seen enough. He's been waiting a year for his hit back, and he wants it now. He rushes forward, screaming,
"Clam up, Skinny. What's wrong with getting rough? I'm itching to tangle with that clown."
And Spidey is in his bag. He screams that he's really pissed now, that he'll take them all on, then go finish off that flaming freak. And Benji's like, you don't say. He rips the boulder from the ground, saying he's gonna knock some sense into Spidey's fat head. Holding the boulder above his head, he wonders where the web head went, but you know Spidey's on the rock. He shouts down to Ben Grimm that he'll give the gargoyles 3 guesses. In the final panel, the Thing screams,
"Well, ain't you the little fun boy? I hope your insurance is all paid up, Bright Eyes."
can somebody tell Aunt Petunia's favorite nephew that the golden liability doesn't worry about insurance because he always brings the pain and never stays for the bill? Spidey says the Thing's concern for him is flattering and asks the Thing when he joined the Salvation Army. Page 6 opens to the Thing shouting,
"Phooey, everybody's a comedian nowadays."
Before launching the boulder into the ocean, and Spidey leaps from the boulder saying, "Nah, I'm not a critic, you're just a bore." The next panel, Spidey has spun a glider out of webbing. It's extending from his fingers and feet tips like bat wings, and he's soaring above the Fantastic Four, screaming, "And now I'll make a pair of wings out of my web fluid and crash dive down and pulverize you." Spidey is planning a kamikaze attack on Mr. Fantastic and the Thing. I imagine he's definitely aiming for the Thing. He's too quick for the orange golem, and I think the Thing knows he's the target too. He raises a giant orange fist saying he was hoping Spidey was going to try that. Before Spidey can land his attack, however, he's yanked from the sky by the Invisible Girl, who snags him with an invisible lasso. Sidebar: reading these comics, having a completely different image of Susan Storm in my head, i.e. Marvel powerhouse since I've been alive, it's been ridiculous to see and realize her power started from a misogynistic idea of hide the girl in the comic until there's housework to do. It needs to be said because I've really always only known her as a powerhouse. We've come a long way, but I am speaking on a comic with no black people shown yet, so I don't think I'm proving anything stating the obvious. But if something is wrong, what's more important to state than that? Especially if it's in the past. Because Spidey doesn't drink or smoke, and he's great at every sport. Yale aside, he ain't Frank Merriwell, but he's Frank Merriwell, you know? He's a positive reimagining of a prior thing. And the past can be reimagined into negative things, too. I say all that to say the past repeats. We decide if the loop gets better or worse. I'm not just talking comics right now. Think different. Back to Invisible Girl wraps Spidey up in her invisible net and pulls Spidey to the sand, saying the nonsense has gone on long enough. In the next panel, we see the Torch flying towards the team. Reed stage right with his arms folded, a salty look on his face. The Thing stage left, his back to us, and Spidey laid out on the sand. The Invisible Girl's hand pressed against his chest, and she flirts a little, shoots a shot at Agent Liability. She says, "You're entirely too clever and adorable to be fighting with us. I'll bet you're as handsome as you are muscular under that mask." And Ben says, "Oh, cut it out, Sue, I just ate." The next panel, we see Sue standing between the Torch and Spidey, telling them to make nice, and of course the Torch flame's still on, says he'd like to bury a hatchet in Spidey's skull. The cold-blooded hothead, ladies and gentlemen, the Human Torch. The next panel, we see Spidey's learned his lesson. He doesn't want any problems. He leaps off of the sand onto a nearby tree, telling Torch to go back to his dull party. Like, my man, you using infrared light to party. I don't even want to be there anyway. I just drop by like, yo, leave the Sandman alone. I'll leave your parties alone. We good? Good. Spidey tells the Torch he's lucky he has Snoops and Benji to wet nurse him. He goes on to say that the Invisible Girl is the only good thing about that overrated Fantastic Four, and we see in the final panel a heart made from webbing laid at Sue Storm's feet as the issue comes to a close. The caption box beneath it reads,
"Like we always say, Spider-Man's not so dumb. He picks his enemies very carefully. More thrills, fun, and fast-moving fantasy next issue. See you then."
And we're out. What a great issue. I think I had more fun trying to figure out why Spidey party crashed on the Torch than I did outlining the main episode this week. I love Spidey history. Just so we have it on record, Spidey can make electric webbing and diamond-encrusted webbing. The kid goes crazy with the science and other titles. But I remember reading this issue as a kid in the same trade paperback that I read Amazing Spider-Man number 7 in. Do you know I forgot the Living Brain and Torch stories completely? My mind was fixated on Pete getting his revenge on Flash Thompson. The image of him flying out of the ring with his arms above his head makes me smile every time I think of it. The Brand X kid hit a man with glasses, put his hands on him 3 times, slapped him on the jaw, and got him in trouble constantly. In my opinion, it's the greatest win of Peter Parker's life outside of meeting a certain redhead. You know who I'm talking about. But slow down, Tiger. We're gonna get there. That's the main episode this week. And that's true. But there is more Me and My Friend Pete available for your listening pleasure right now. If you support this show on patreon.com, patrons get a bonus show every week where I run through comic books from all over the multiverse of comics, from Marvel to DC to all points in between. This week's bonus episode is The Immortal Iron Fist Volume 1, Number 16, Happy Birthday Danny, and features the new Where Are You? Here segment, and 4 spotlights showcasing the best superhero clique to ever do it. I'm talking about Colleen Wing, Misty Knight, Luke Cage, and of course, the immortal weapon himself, Daniel Rankai, better known the world over as the Iron Fist. Head over to patreon.com/HSPP and sign up to the Keykeeper or High Council tiers now to find out the Iron Fist plans for the future. He has just stopped a nuclear bomb-laced train from destroying an ancient city of heaven with one punch, so... Yeah, that happened. And with all that said, thank you so much for listening. I had such a great time running through this issue of Amazing Spider-Man today. A very special thanks once again to the Right Minders, the Keykeepers, and the High Council. Your support is the engine behind this wonderful, crazy train we're on, and I'm truly grateful you let me be the conductor. And to you all, I say, please take care, please think of the world, and please be true to yourself. And remember, with great power, you know the rest. Make sure you're being responsible. I'm out of here.